Welcome to English 2450, COM 2010, Intro to Film, Week 3, lecture video number 2, where I will be discussing settings, costumes, makeup, hair, blocking, acting, and kinesis. Now, the good thing about this video is that I really feel like the best way to discuss these parts of mise-en-scène is to, as a class, watch a video clip or a film together and then discuss a specific example. So here I'm just going to be giving some brief kind of contextual information, clarifications, and kind of history for some of this terminology, but I'm not going to be getting into a lot of details or examples because we can cover that in class. So here I've broken down the 4 main aspects of mise-en-scène, putting into the scene, which are settings, costumes, makeup, and hair, lighting, and blocking, acting / kinesis, right? So we're going to be skipping over lighting because that's a complex enough aspect of mise-en-scène for it to get its own separate week, which is going to be next week. And then in the next video of the series, I'll be talking about 2 important visual qualities of film, which are color and the illusion of depth. So for right now, let's start by talking about settings. So when I refer to settings, I'm talking specifically about on location versus constructed on a soundstage. So on this slide here, you'll also see a reference to composites, which is a setting that's added through green screen by computer generated imagery or through matte compositing, which is essentially a layering of images that happens during the editing process. But if you'll remember my last video, I talked about how digital effects are not really considered part of mise-en-scène because when they are produced in the film production process overall. So right now I want to just focus on physical, real material settings, which can be on location, which is exactly what it sounds like, or they can be constructed on a soundstage. Now, a soundstage is a large space, acres and acres usually, that is specifically used for the production of film sets, right? So it's soundproof, it's usually lightproof, and it has its own sort of internal lighting systems rigged up. And that's where a lot of television series are filmed, a lot of movies are filmed. And on location is more specifically when a director sends scouts out into the world, they find a space that they want to shoot in and they shoot on that particular location. So setting can tell us a lot about a film before any characters open their mouth, before we know anything about the narrative. Another thing that can tell us quite a lot about the setting is the way that it is designed and constructed. So any given setting or area that a film is being shot is going to have a combination of props, or also known as properties, and set dressing or set decor. And set dressing is usually the stuff in the background that helps kind of flesh out that area and make it seem real. Properties are specifically objects that an actor interacts with. An actor picks it up or does something with that particular object. So let's just say your setting is a living room in a ranch-style home in kind of middle America. You've got a painting of a boat on the wall. Now that's probably just set dressing. The painting is there because we assume that the family living in that house has some art on their walls. So it adds a level of kind of visual depth or realism. If a character takes that painting, plucks it off the wall, and then bashes it over the head of another character, suddenly it's not just set dressing anymore. It is a prop. It is a property. So that's the difference between a prop versus set dressing is, does an actor interact with the object? Do they pick it up? Do they touch it? Do they have some sort of physical interaction with that object? So a couch is just a couch until a character sits on that couch, and then the couch is suddenly a prop, right? So another thing to think about when we're talking about settings, props, and set dressing is, what do all of these things do together to tell us about the film? What do they tell us about the genre of a film? What do they tell us about the time period that the story is taking place in? The mood of the characters? A lot of information can be conveyed through the setting before characters say a single word. So we know that, like, for example, in a Western film, we would expect the setting to be the Wild West, right? In a science fiction film, we might expect it to be a dystopian future or on a space station. We know that the mood of a film can be really dictated by when and where it's taking place. So if we open our film on a foggy, dreary, cemetery, we would expect something about the mood or the tone of that film based on that particular setting. Now, another element of mise-en-scène is costumes, makeup, and hair. And of course, the best way to talk about costumes, makeup, and hair is to look at specific examples. But some kind of basic information here about the sort of historical development of costumes, makeup, and hair in film history is that in early films, actors actually didn't have specific costumes. They wore their own clothing, they styled their hair normally, but they did have to wear a lot of makeup. Early film stock was not very high quality, so actors' faces would not show up unless they wore quite a bit of makeup. So early filmmaking, costumes and hairstylists weren't really a thing, but makeup has always been a part of the filmmaking history. And then when we kind of moved from early filmmaking into the studio system of the 1930s to the 1960s, you started getting art departments that were dedicated to styling the hair and the makeup of actors and also providing different wardrobes and costumes. During that studio system, actors' contracts would often require that they received cosmetic dentistry, that they dyed their hair or treated their hair, that they wore specific types of clothing, and they were like the studios were allowed to require this of their actors because back then they had a pretty solid monopoly on the production, distribution, and exhibition system of movies. So typically stars, if they wanted to have their names out there and to actually be cast in films, they had to kind of go along with the contracts set by the studios. A lot of times these contracts were also definitely designed to kind of whitewash actors and actresses that had non-white heritage. Were often required to dye their hair, lighten their skin, and to intentionally sort of appear white to appeal to movie audiences. And now there aren't typically actor contracts that require this same level of kind of cosmetic care and alteration in terms of what the studio requires. Although actors, male and female, do still typically wear makeup when they're on screen to prosthetically enhance or alter their faces, to hide blemishes and wrinkles, and to enhance facial expressiveness. So typically makeup is concentrated on eyes, eyebrows, and mouths because those are the most kind of expressive parts of the face. So typically when you see a character on screen for TV or a movie, they are wearing some level of makeup, even if it doesn't look like they are. And then this kind of question here relates to the question I asked about setting, which is what do we know about characters and stories being told in films based on costumes, hair, and makeup? Now that's a question that we can think about more, is how do costumes convey whether a character is happy or sad or rich or poor, what their social standing is, what their career is, what their position within the story is. And we know a lot about characters based on costumes, makeup, and hair that we don't even necessarily immediately think about because that process of analyzing those visual choices becomes second nature to us. Now, the last piece of the puzzle that I wanted to talk about for this video is blocking, acting, and kinesis. And acting, what actors do, is actually considered part of the mise-en-scène. It is put into the scene. The actor is told where to go, what to say, what to do. And although there's some level of improvisation in a lot of films, and the actors and the directors might collaborate on the performance, it is ultimately considered part of the mise-en-scène, which is very kind of directed and controlled within a specific environment. Now, blocking here refers to where the actors are in relation to each other, in relation to the setting and the set decor, in relation to the props, and in relation to the camera. So where are the actors on the screen? How are they organized? Where are they standing, or laying or sitting on the screen compared to other things on the screen? How are they organized in the space? Now, this terminology also comes from theater as well. Acting means anything that the actor does to convey meaning. So facial expressions, gestures, their movement, their interaction with other figures, other people, other props, how they deliver their lines, etc. Acting could be its entire own week of a intro to film class. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, although there are lots of good articles, books, videos on the craft of acting that are worth looking into if you're interested in learning more. Now, kinesis refers specifically to movement, right? Actors aren't the only thing that move on a screen, but actors are one important part of kinesis, right? Our eyes are trained to follow movement, especially the movement of, humans, other living figures. It's an evolutionary trait meant for, self-protection, right? That we want to follow the movement of something because it could potentially be a predator. So if an actor on screen moves into the foreground or into the background, they twitch their fingers, they glance sideways, they do any number of kind of small physical movements, that has an impact on the audience. It's something that we notice and we take stock of. So the movement of actors on the screen, where they are placed in relation to each other, the setting, the props, and the camera, and how they express their emotions, how they deliver their words, are all very important and finely wrought details of how a film is put together and how the mise en scène affects the audience. So related to the questions I've been asking, what does a specific acting style, what does a specific blocking style, and what does kinetic motion tell us about a character, tell us about a story? So these are questions to keep thinking about. What is the setting, the set decor, the props, costumes, makeup, hair, blocking, acting, and kinesis? What do all of these aspects of mise en scène tell us about the particular thing that we're watching at any given point in time? And this is an analytical skill that we're going to continue working on and building over the course of the semester. So stay tuned for video 3, where I'm going to talk about color and the illusion of depth.